crazy things went down in Mexico, where apparently a military operation killed a member or leader of the cartel. And the problem that has been exacerbated here is that there are American tourists that are now stuck. Apparently, there was no warning. There was no, you guys need to evacuate now before this happens or whatever. So there are American tourists that are trapped in Mexico and told not to leave. Now, a lot of people are talking about the story, but I think it's really important also to get into who actually gives these weapons to the cartel. I'll give you a hint. It may not be who you think it is. So let's get into all of this, folks. Again, it was violence, crazy chaos in Mexico after a cartel boss was killed. Check this out.
This morning, millions on edge across Mexico after a military operation killed one of the country's most notorious cartel bosses. Criminal groups responding with mass vandalism and violence. The State Department urging U.S. citizens across several Mexican states to continue sheltering in place this morning from Tijuana to Puerto Vallarta. Officials say Sunday's military raid killed more than 30 cartel members, including the head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho. Video verified by ABC News showing parts of that operation, followed by a barrage of gunfire and blasts.
We have to skip that part here. There we go.
Say the violence erupted Sunday morning without warning.
Their goal was clearly to block all main roads in Puerto Vallarta. And clearly it wasn't to kill people, because they easily could have killed all of us.
Yep.
So that guy is an American tourist.
Tony Pizer says he was vacationing with his husband and friends in Puerto Vallarta when their car was attacked by an armed man.
And he got to the car, pointed at my head, and through the window said, "Get out of the car." And all of us exited the vehicle. And at that point, he got into the car and drove it just a few yards into the intersection, and then threw an incendiary device in it, which exploded, and the car was quickly engulfed in flames.
Now, do you see how the U.S. government doesn't stop and think about the safety of the American people before they start these types of operations? Yes, this operation was led by, of course, the U.S. government. They didn't stop and think about that. They also didn't stop and think about the fact that there are plenty of Americans that are retired that have moved to Mexico, right? In fact, if you look on YouTube, you can see a number of people that are like the expats that are living in Mexico, and they do these vlogs about their experience leaving the US and moving to Mexico, because it's, a lot cheaper to live there if you're coming from the US. They didn't stop and think about these things, but just like they don't stop and think about civilians that may be harmed or killed in other countries when they go in and bomb people there. That's something I want you to make that connection to geopolitics, to domestic policy, like the way they treat people abroad, and compare that to how they treat us as well. Let's go on a little bit more here.
Now, the White House has confirmed the U.S. provided intelligence to Mexican officials, but now sources tell ABC News the CIA was instrumental in removing El Mencho, but no American troops were on the ground for the operation.
So here we go with the CIA again. Let's go ahead and go to the next one here, because they implement these operations and then they don't think about the fact like, okay, there's people who may be affected, may be impacted. And then you just start total chaos in places. They are known for going into other countries, starting operations, and it just basically sparks all of this chaos. And then they're like, well, our job is done. You guys figure it out. So from what I understand, what I was reading earlier today, there are still tourists trapped there. They're told to shelter in place, not to leave. So let's put this one up here. Here's another.
This morning, American tourists desperate to leave Mexico, following stunning scenes of violence at a number of popular resort areas, including charred buildings and cars and storefronts riddled with bullets. The chaos blamed on drug cartel members furious about the killing of their boss over the weekend by Mexican special forces. Mexican authorities say they found the drug kingpin Nemesio Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, by tracking his romantic partner. American Tony Pizer and his partner experiencing the terror firsthand, saying they were forced out of their rental vehicle at gunpoint.
All of a sudden, a young man ran at us with a gun, and my friend in the backseat said, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun."
Their SUV later set on fire.
He threw a incendiary device in the vehicle, and our car exploded.
The couple now reunited after being separated in the scramble. Many other American tourists are still unable to get out of Mexico. Since all of this unfolded, what's the scene on the ground like right now?
You would think it was peaceful, but it's kind of eerie.
Other Americans describing the war-like violence that unfolded over the weekend, with buildings engulfed in flames and choppers flying overhead.
On both sides of the helicopter, there were men with very large guns. So we just hoped that they were the good guys and not the bad guys.
Mexico's president urging calm, saying the government is in control. Telemundo anchor Julio Vaquero describing the scene on the ground in Guadalajara.
Businesses that have been vandalized, broken glasses, bullets, cars that have been burnt across the streets. Today, the work's to recover. They're cleaning up to go back to normal.
Operations at Guadalajara Airport also coming back, and Americans like Yoni Pizer are hoping to get back home.
I have to imagine this is still a moment in time that you won't soon forget.
That would be an accurate statement.
So one of the things that I want to add here as well, when we talk about destabilization, this is a good point that Money Mindset brings up. This is an old CIA tactic, destabilization. Yeah, because it causes chaos, right? And that's another thing that the CIA has been known to do, right? So we got to remember that here. The president of Mexico, Claudia, said that they have this under control. Again, I point to the hypocrisy because the U.S. government says, okay, we're going to go take down a leader of the cartel, this cartel in Mexico, but you just gave Juan Hernandez a pardon. I mean, basically what a lot of this comes down to is these countries that are willing to work with the West in the way that the West wants them to, and the countries that are not willing to do that. Claudia Sheinbaum has been very firm about where she stands with this presidential administration and what she is not going to do. She's not willing to bend the knee to this administration. These are typically the countries that they tend to target. That's what I want people to understand. The countries that are willing to work with the West in the way that the West wants, even if they have this type of activity happening in their country, they're more willing to leave them alone. They usually go after the ones that are not willing to work with them the way that they want. These are the things that people have to keep into consideration, right? It was a similar situation with Venezuela. They're not really, Maduro wasn't willing to do what the West wanted to do. So they're like, we're going to go after him. Claudia Sheinbaum, Donald Trump has been coming after her for quite some time. She isn't willing to do what Donald Trump wants her to do. So they're going to go into that country and target those people. There are criminal organizations all over the entire world. One of the big ones that we've been talking about multiple times on the show recently is the whole Epstein organized crime organization. All over the world. You don't see them trying to take those people down. So that lets you know what it's really all about. We'll continue on here, and then I'm going to show you where they get these weapons from.
Yeah, and Mexican authorities say they're also still in the process of cleaning up those blocked roadways, removing burned up cars that were left behind. And as for air travel, according to the State Department, all other airports in Mexico are open, most operating normally. Guys.
So yeah, obviously a scary time if you're there and you're a tourist, but also if you're an expat who lives there and you're like, what the hell is going on? I left the U.S. and these things are happening. I want you to hear what the Mexico Defense Secretary said about where a lot of these weapons come from. I'm going to read this to you because he's speaking in Spanish. So listen here.
Ya se ha mencionado aquí hablando de la estrategia general.
Speaking of the strategy general, since the beginning of the administration, 23,000 weapons have been seized.
Se han asegurado en lo que va de la administración 23,000 armas. De esas 23,000 armas.
Of those 23,000 weapons, 80% are U.S. origin.
Armas, el 80% son de origen norteamericano. Entonces, en este caso, más o menos es la.
So in this case, the proportion is roughly the same. I'm going to say it again. Of those weapons, 80% are U.S. origin because the U.S. government has been known to supply weapons to the cartel in Mexico. But we're not the only ones. I'm going to tell you who else has been doing this. So do you guys see the issue? The US or other Western countries, they'll come in and they'll supply weapons to other groups, other organized crime organizations in these countries. These groups will then destabilize the countries. And then the US will be like, use that as an excuse to go in and invade those countries. You see this effect? This is one of the things that people don't sit back and ask. People complain about the cartel and they say the cartel's bad, yada, yada. Yeah, but they don't sit back and ask, where do the weapons come from? They're not making the weapons. They come from us. It was reported also in the Rolling Stone. Shout out to Power to the People. Important context to what is happening in Mexico. The CIA arms Mexican cartels. Now, some of you, I'll show you this in a second. Some of you might be familiar with things like this happening right here in the United States. I'll give you an example in just a second. How the U.S. arms the Mexican cartels. This was reported by the Rolling Stone like a while back. So we've been arming the cartels, not you and me personally, but the CIA, the intel agencies here have been arming the cartels in Mexico at the same time complaining about the cartels and saying that they need to take out the cartels. Tell me how that makes sense. It doesn't, does it? No. Now I want to tell you another example. That was also done right here in the United States. The CIA put drugs into urban Black communities. And then, of course, the police state goes in to arrest people in those communities. Now, there was a whistleblower who reported this information, and that was Gary Webb. And next thing we knew, Gary was gone. They say Gary did it himself. I think we know better. They've been doing this. They come in and they create chaos, because with chaos, there is destabilization. That's one of the easiest ways to destabilize a community, a neighborhood, or a country. A lot of times the chaos is caused from the outside. Now, they won't teach you this in the history books. You're not going to find this in your history textbook in school, whether it's high school, they're not going to teach you this. They're not going to tell you how the CIA came in and they infiltrated Black communities and they dropped drugs off there so that they could actually aid to the war on drugs. They're not going to tell you how the CIA drops off weapons to the cartel in Mexico so that they could create chaos and destabilization there. And you say, well, why would they do that to Mexico? Because there's money to be made. If there wasn't money to be made for these weapon transfers, it would not happen. But it's not just the CIA. We are not alone. Check this out. The Guardian reported this a while back. This was reported in 2020. Many of the weapons used in the murders of 119 journalists that were imported, and Mexico's laws and culture making tracing them impossible. But when we go down here, I want to show you where they're getting a lot of these weapons from. Here we go. An international coalition of journalists coordinated by the nonprofit Forbidden Stories examined the flow of weapons into Mexico in an effort to understand where the guns are coming from. This is what they found. Put this here, the main findings. Well, let me highlight it. Yes. Weapons manufactured in Europe and Israel sold legally to the Mexican army, as well as guns trafficked illegally across the U.S. border, are probably being used to commit human rights violations and gangland executions, according to declassified military documents obtained by the non-governmental organization Stop U.S. Arms to Mexico. Weapons manufactured in Europe and ding, 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 Israel. Israel also sells weapons to the cartels in Mexico. And the U.S. knows this too. The U.S. government, they know this. This is why I say it's good to ask, how did we get here, right? Like, this is the problem. You say, okay, well, cartels are creating a problem in Mexico. Okay, How did that happen? How did they get there? Where did the weapons come from? How did they come into power? It's always important to go all the way back and to see how did we get here. So that's one of the things that they found. It goes on to say here, trade is booming. European armed companies are shipping hundreds of millions of dollars worth of guns, parts, and ammunition to Mexican states with dire human rights records. Multinational armed companies could be violating European export laws, as only a fraction of end users are being reported. A combination of weak international regulations and a culture of impunity in Mexico makes tracing firearms used to commit crimes back to their origins virtually impossible. It also goes on to talk about this was a booming business. Boom, boom. When we get to this part here, which I think is important, shout out to the Middle East Monitor here. How Israel armed the drug cartels, part 2. Actually have to skip this part because I can't show actual drugs on here, and we'll bring it back in. Check this out. The Medellin cartel's military leader was Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, who set up self-defense squadrons to protect his ranchers from left-wing guerrillas like the FARC, which had been taxing their cocaine exports. Rodriguez and his affiliated far-right death squads were responsible for some of the country's worst campaigns of political terror, targeting judges, politicians, and civilians alike for assassination. According to the Colombian secret police, the Cockburns wrote in their book Dangerous Liaisons, Colonel Klein had not only taught Rodriguez gotcha men how to make bombs, including one that exploded on board a commuter flight, he had also trained killers of Luis Carlos Galán, a presidential candidate in 1989, who was often compared to JFK and who almost certainly would have moved into the presidential palace. General Maza also accused Klein of importing quantities of Israeli arms for the Medellin cartel. Israeli arms going all the way back to 1989. But Israel will complain about the cartels. These weapons were Israeli army surplus, including mortars, mines, and explosives, infrared equipment, machine guns, and medical supplies. The shipments also included 500 assault rifles and 200,000 rounds of ammunition. This is not the type of stuff, guys, that they just come up with on their own. It was given to them. In 1989, after U.S. and Colombian authorities had finally turned decisively against Escobar and his associates, they eventually cracked down on the cartel. Rodriguez, along with his son and bodyguards, died in a last stand shootout. When they lined up the bodies, the authorities found a cache of 178 Israeli Galil assault rifles. So this is where the weapons come from: the United States and Israel. And they don't want to teach you this. When we talk about the cartels in Mexico without the weapons, do they have this power? So you have two governments that are giving them the weapons to have the power in Mexico, to have chaos, to control the people. And then those same two governments complain about the cartels that they actually supplied. That's the part that's not mentioned. This has been going on for years. And nobody wants to say it. Well, I say nobody. None of the politicians want to say it. A lot of your Congress members know this too. This isn't just a me thing, and they don't want to say it. So I think that, even when it comes to something like Mexico, like, can you teach an old dog like new tricks when it comes to the cartel? I mean, the reality is the CIA has been known to wreak havoc across the world. Sometimes they've been known to go into places where there is no unrest at all, and they go in and they create unrest. And part of the big problem that honestly, like, people run into is a lot of people don't know about it because they're not taught about it. You got to dig for this type of information. That's why I said it's not in your history textbooks, because they want you to believe the CIA is a good organization. They want you to believe the FBI is a good organization. The same FBI that doesn't even want to punish the people that are all in the Epstein files, where there are clear crimes that are outlined there. Where they protect the powerful, they protect the rich. I was watching this show called Secession. I don't know if everybody's seen that show. It's really good. People have been telling me to watch it for years, and I just started watching it, and it's so, so good. What that show shows you, it's about a family, billionaire family. The dad's an asshole, but it's funny as hell. That show shows you how money and corruption work, not just in politics, but also organized crime, covering up crime. It shows you how, when you have that type of capital, the things that you can get away with, how you can control the media. It shows you how you can control members of Congress, how you can make murder go away, all because you have money. It's a really good show. You guys should check it out. So if you got money, you can get away with a lot of things. But the cartel situation that many people complain about, including Marco Rubio, the politicians, the media, has been funded by the CIA and Israel. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.